I'm going to check if we're live. Which it never, I believe we're live. What do you reckon, Cathy?
It tells me.
Yeah, we're live.
Streaming live.
So, hello, Cathy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, good. So, we've been speaking a lot, haven't we? And I've just been talking about, wizard wellness, and I really want to start getting more regular guest speakers in now because, different people that contact me and stuff I see in the group, I know help is needed. And I've done lots of chats in the past. We're going to set up a guide section in the group so we can look at previous chats, but really want to build on what we've got already. And you've kindly said you're going to come in today and have a chat around sort of anxiety and psychoeducation, and basically look at, when we're anxious and depressed, what our body response is, and basically why the hell do we behave like we do. And
it's my take on it, but it comes from a sort of neuroscience and mind-body sort of connection background, which I'm really into. But I use this with every client that I work with. I explain this to them because you know what, it helps people realize that actually their bodies and their brains are doing some pretty normal stuff. It's just sometimes our brains get a little bit stuck and think things are dangerous when they're not. And hopefully this will explain it in a way so everybody has a bit of an aha moment and goes, oh, right, I get it now.
Yeah, definitely. And, I've seen what you're going to present, and I can't wait for you to present it because, I don't know whether there's some new people in the group. So I qualified as a cognitive hypnotherapist 5 years ago and saw clients for a few years, but realized there's a lot better people at doing it than what I was. Wow. And, talking to people like yourself, it just brings it all back to me of how invaluable it was when I done my training and was seeing clients. And I can't wait. And I really appreciate you coming on.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. So let's fire away.
Yeah. So hopefully you can, I've shared my screen.
Okay. So I'm going to share mine. Here we go. Right.
See, we know what we're doing, right?
We do know what we're doing. Okay. So we do know what we're doing. Right. So can you see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
So you might see a little black rectangle moving around the screen as I share. In fact, I'm going to stop sharing 1 second because I've just realized I've shared the wrong thing. One moment. I'm just going to, here we go. Right, here we go.
And just before we start as well, I appreciate it's not probably the right time for people to be looking within the group. It's all going to be recorded and available for you to view back. And if you've got any questions after we've finished, by all means, Cathy's in the group, so we can get back to you if you've got any questions.
Okay. So here we go. I'm actually presenting this straight from, and I can't work out how to not share all of this stuff with you first. Anyway, there you go. We're there. Cool.
Can't beat Canva.
You can't beat Canva. No, I love a bit of Canva. Okie doke. So this is, as I say, this is my take on psychoeducation. If you Google or psychoeducation, you'll get various, explanations for what it is. But this is basically what I explain to everyone that I work with, young people, adults, just to give them an insight and to give them that the belief that they can actually do something about what is going on for them.
Brilliant.
Okay, so I'm going to start off and right at the beginning, the human brain was developed to deal with a radically different time. Homo sapiens, that's what we are, emerged about 300,000 years ago. And we had to be alert for dangerous predators, for hostile clans, and we lived in a very, very, very unpopulated world as well. Potential sources for food and shelter. And our body evolved to deal with that situation. And of course, we evolved to understand that feelings, those sixth sense, that feeling in our body were really important, and we evolved not to neutralize them. Most importantly, a feeling in your body is telling you something. And in that split second before you even know you're moving, if you've got a dangerous animal coming towards you, if you didn't act on that unconscious impulse, you'd probably be dead.
Yeah.
Okay. So the feeling is telling you something, therefore you need to act on it. And people who acted on their feelings survived. But now in the modern age, this gets us stuck. Most fear that we have now is unnecessary. Occasionally it's needed, but actually most of the time it's unnecessary. And so, and again, I'm going to move this little box around. So weird little box moving. So we've got this very large, complicated brain. Our brain to body ratio is actually 6 times that of other mammals. And the neurons in the cerebral cortex, so that outer layer that's responsible for the cognition, they're more densely packed than any other creature on Earth. But what's clear, and this neuroscientist who's very clever, has basically suggested that what's clear is that the neural hardware took shape under conditions that were so radically different to the ones that contend with today. And he said our brains basically evolved to focus on one thing at a time. So we've got this wonderfully complicated brain of ours, but it's only really good at dealing with simple, maybe very dangerous, but simple sort of situations. Mm-hmm. And so I often ask the kids that I'm working with, what's your brain for? And they'll go, Cathy, it's for thinking. Well, there's a trick question. It's not. Your brain is not for thinking. It's basically running the budget in your body that is going to regulate all those components that you've got in your body. And I mean, we've got water, salt, oxygen, carbon dioxide, we've got cortisol, fat, opioids, we've got insulin, glucose, all of that stuff going on. It's very complicated. And so we've evolved for our brain to run the budget of that body, to regulate it. So it's trying to avoid surprises all the time. So it's trying to anticipate the need before you arrive, before it arises, to make sure that you've got enough resources in the body. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's great. That's great when we're living 300,000 years ago. Very simple. Okay. But so what is
I was just going to say, and you know, just linking it, always link it to obviously the painting. So, you know, hostile clans could be other Facebook groups.
Other Facebook groups,
but, you know,
no, but
it's like, you know, in today's world, it could be an environment you're working in, could be your family, you know, predators.
Any of that. It could be all social interaction, according to your brain, has the potential to be life-threatening. If you think of it like that, it makes sense. Yeah. When you're having that difficult conversation, if you've got to say something really awkward, guess what? We feel often really, really, really uncomfortable and find that we don't have the words. I'll explain more of that. Yeah. So our brain's predicting. It's based on what's happened in the past. It's going to predict what's going to happen in the future. So it bases it based on the actions that we took in similar circumstances. And all animals, including humans, will retrieve past experiences in order to prepare the body for action. So it's predicting the amount of withdrawals it needs from your body budget. If it decides that a threat it perceives is greater than the danger it presents by taking the resources out of the body, it will take action. Okay, so, and taking action, by taking action, it reacts as if there is a threat to life, because that's what we are evolved to do. Okay, and the problem, obviously, in the current environment is what we believe to be dangerous. What our brain believes is a threat is not necessarily a threat any longer. And this is where the feeling in the body comes. It's telling us there's a threat, but it may not be a life threat, but it will act as if it is.
Yeah.
So we have, our brain is basically dealing in every second. Sorry, I'm covering up some of the words. In every second, it's actually filtering 11 million bits of information. And by that, what I mean is you've got data being received through your eyes, your ears, your nose, your other sensory organs, your skin. You've got a barrage of light waves coming through. You've got chemicals, you've got changes in air pressure. That's all making up lots and lots and lots of tiny bits for our brain to filter. And our short-term memory can only store between 5 and 9 bits of that data at any one point. So consequently, your brain's got to try and make sense of it in another way. So it uses those past experiences, it's processing it all unconsciously, okay, to give meaning to everything. So again, you know, we mentioned before that every human interaction has that capacity to go wrong. And if it does, or if it's perceived to go wrong, the brain will act as if that's a threat. And it will also store it as if it was a threat in the past. This is really important to all of this. So imagine you've got, you know, there's a lot more talk about it now, isn't there? You know, with neurodiversity, which is something I'm really interested in, and people with social communication difficulties, or maybe speech and language, you know, delays, or that struggle to communicate or understand other people. That is stuck back somewhere in the past in their brain as being threatening. Yeah. You know, if you found learning difficult at school, it just it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it sort of presents itself differently as you get older. So 90% of what's going on in your brain is processed unconsciously. Okay, but by the time you're acting on something, by the time you're aware of it, it's already happened.
So just on this point, a very simple example could be you've done a job, say years ago, and there was a big sort of red shiny door, you know, like that's so that's what, you know, the job entailed was like. You may not have even done the red shiny door, but you come across a client which give you a bit of grief, didn't pay, whatever, and you know, like I said, I had a red front door. It could in the future, basically, if you went to another job with a red door, you could get the same feelings of anxiety and stress you had
exactly
from years ago. So just that's how easily it can trigger you, right? And you don't even know why the hell you're being triggered.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be exactly the same thing. It can be similar. Your brain is predicting. You know, back at 300,000 years ago, you know, when we were all living in tribes and little kids would go out with their parents, you know, to hunt, they would be taught how to behave in the presence of a predatory animal. So if you had a saber-toothed tiger and you watched the fear and the fight going on and all of that, if you were then presented with a similar animal, your brain would go, well, that's similar enough to that animal, so I'm going to protect you in the same way. Okay, doesn't have to be exactly the same. So this is another way of looking at the filtering. So this brain, we've got something called the amygdala. This is oversimplified, but it's useful. So the amygdala is part of the fear circuitry in the brain. You've got all this information coming in, and the amygdala, I explain it to a lot of people. It's a bit like the security guard on the door. Yeah, checking someone coming in and going, no, you're all right, you can come in, or no, and getting aggressive. Okay. So the amygdala is basically determining whether something's threatening. And when it decides it's threatening, it activates chemical messages, and those get put into your bloodstream so the body can respond appropriately. So actually, when we react to something, we're not in control of it. Our brain's doing it. Our body's doing it. And by the time you know you're doing it, you've done it. So this is one way of looking at it. This is a simplified version of the anxiety response. So this is the effect you have on the brain and the body. And I start off here with this green area here. This prefrontal cortex, the prefrontal cortex here is where the part of the brain that we need to have access to do all that higher cognition. That's where the working memory sits. That's where our sophisticated language patterns are, where, you know, where we can be logical, where we can be reasonable, where we can be socially engaged. Okay, that's online. There's a big red arrow there for a reason, because when the amygdala fires off and activates, we drop into a sympathetic nervous system, and this activates the protection response, the fight-flight response. Okay, so your heart rate increases, you breathe faster, your digestive system cuts off, because those things all support you being able to get away quicker. Yeah, your body becomes pumped with oxygen, the blood goes to all the extremities so you can get away. Your digestive system cuts off, so you're not, you know, if the human response was to focus on eating and not getting away, we'd all be dead. Mm-hmm. The freeze response is dropping down further. That is again the ultimate protection response. If you imagine an animal being chased by a predator, it will flight, it may fight, but then when it gets caught, it will shut down completely. All the blood gets pulled into the center of the body, so the extremities aren't going to be pumping blood out if, say, a part of it gets, you know, damaged or bitten. But the blood supply moving here, what happens is when we drop into our sympathetic nervous system, the blood supply actually moves away from the prefrontal cortex to focus on the more fundamental aspects it needs to. So when this blood supply moves away from the prefrontal cortex, it's like that part's gone offline. So you can't be calm, you can't use your language, your logic goes to pot. So actually you're very strongly emotional and you're pretty stupid. So in those moments,
it's all unconscious as well, right? Once that kicks in,
yeah,
boom, you've gone down a rabbit hole, you know.
So you're in a house with the client from hell, who's being really horrible and being demanding and having a go at you and shouting at you. How many times do we afterwards go, why didn't I say this? Why couldn't I do that? That's because in that moment, most of us will drop into our anxiety response. The sympathetic nervous system's taking over, and actually we lose the ability to say all the things that we would be capable of saying if we were really calm and rational. So in a way, it's not our fault. Okay. So this is where you will recognize this. And I'm just going to get rid of that. I don't know how to get rid of that floating some string. Anyway, hopefully everybody can work that way around it. You can't see it. Well, that's good then. That's good. So at the bottom there is a red line with an arrow on the end, and that is indicating our timeline, our life as we grow. Yeah. And at the bottom, I've written stages of cognitive development, you know, straight time. It's really important to understand that, because actually the human brain develops rapidly from birth, but before the ages of 7 or 8, it's pre-rational, it's pre-concept operational, it's called, right? So a kid's brain is not necessarily able to understand that things that might be going on around them or to them aren't actually a direct result of them doing something wrong, or them being faulty, or them being deserving of it, if you see me. Post that age, we can rationalize. So we start to be able to rationalize. So we understand that maybe people might be having a bad day, for example. Okay, so that may be why they're being really cranky or difficult. Okay. Significant emotional events can happen to us, and they can happen at any time, but the younger they happen, the more significant they become in terms of getting stuck on our timeline and being the source code for multiple protective moments afterwards, because they understand at the age they were felt. So we might have an adult who is, oh my goodness, I've got to have a really tricky conversation with my client here, and they are absolutely full of anxiety. Their stomach's going, they're going to the loo, their mouth's gone dry, they can't think of the right words to say, blah, 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 blah. We might track that back to a situation in the classroom. You know, I've got a lot of dyslexics in my family, and they've lived this experience as well, where they feel stupid, or actually they might even be called stupid, or may have been called stupid, or people laugh at something they've said because they've misunderstood it. Well, that gets stuck on the timeline, if you like, and then provides the source code memory for the brain to be continually protecting against it. So a significant emotional event can then form a limiting belief, like this one here: I'm stupid, or I can't speak properly, or I can't do public speaking, or I can't talk to other people without sounding like a fool. And because the brain is perpetually looking for similar events triggered by a look on someone's face, or a tone in someone's voice, or a classroom setting, or something, yeah, it triggers more and more and more events, and then you get a generalized form of the anxiety as time goes by, as we go into adulthood. So a lot of things, as you know, because we've done the same training, you know that a lot of phobias start off like this and actually manifest into, they start from something quite different to the ultimate phobia. Okay.
So something like, I see loads of comments, people getting anxious before they perhaps do wallpapering, or, you know, start a new job, that sort of feeling and not being good enough.
Yeah.
You know, that's what's coming across here, isn't it? It's like, it's nothing to do with your ability, because I always say 99% of your clients absolutely love what you do. So you know you're competent at what you're doing. So it's nothing to do with decorating at all. It's relating to, and it doesn't even have to be a major event. It's just that time where our brains are developing, we can't rationalize, and we're told we're stupid or not good enough or whatever it may be. And we may have taken it on board into adult life.
Exactly. And of course, let's face it, the trades, there are a lot of people in the trades who didn't find it that easy at school. They're practical, they're kinesthetic type people. They learn, but they do things with their hands. They're common sense people. And increasingly, and this is a real issue nowadays, but it was to some degree when I went to school, which was quite a long time ago. But you were only regarded as successful if you're an academic success. So it starts really early on.
Yeah.
Really early on.
Yeah, which is terrible, isn't it? And I always say that to my kids, you know, it's another subject, but, you know, your intelligence is not based on what grade you get.
I know. And all my kids, I've got 3, but all of them have found the school system tricky because they're logical, practical thinkers. They're not the high academic flyers. And, you know, it takes a lot of unpicking. But anyway, that, as you say, is another subject. But you can see where it comes from. So this in the therapy the I do and you're trained in, one of our main tools is to timeline feelings back to try and get to the source code, and then we can help reprocess them. Because once you deal with this, once the protection's gone away from the old memory, guess what? It's not there anymore. So the protection falls away. This is how the therapy works. Okay. Yeah. So these are all examples of anxiety responses. The fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Fawn is often not mentioned. No. Fawn is increasingly being understood. So you can see that fight, you know, we can get aggressive, we can talk back, we swear, we overtalk. Narcissism is regarded as a fight response, being controlling, explosive bullying. Flight, again, you know, obvious, you can hide, you avoid doing things, or you might be an ultra workaholic, never stopping, because actually you're never going to be good enough unless you work every second of the day. Overthinking, your mind, you can't shut your mind up. We can be perfectionism. You know, people who think they can't hang wallpaper. I mean, I see on your group a lot of people going, oh my God, the wallpaper, and actually they do a great job. I wouldn't know, you know. And fawn, you know, again, going back 300,000 years ago, if you met somebody from another tribe who had the potential to, you know, kill you, you'd be looking to keep them happy. And you would be looking to compromise your own boundaries in order to protect your family.
Just quickly on that point, Fawn, I'll really identify in it, and I see a lot in the group as well, you know, of people pleasing, you know, the clients which are paying us, we've got to please them, otherwise, you know, they might not pay. And then they end up being the problem clients, you know, and that lack of boundaries and all that's, very, very interesting.
Well, you can see how this fundamental stuff sort of pervades all these aspects of our lives. Yeah. You compromise, you go, all right, I'll do that for 50 quid instead of charging 200. And before you know it, they're crossing your boundary and they're overstepping and they're taking the mick.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And then freeze ultimately is when the brain decides that things are so dangerous, it's got to ultimately protect you. And that's when we get disassociated. We may just get completely stuck. We may isolate ourselves or feel really isolated and just stop feeling. And that is actually a bodily response. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Great list there, fascinating.
So I've got my little notes down here as well. 1 second. Oh, do you want to play a little game?
Go on.
Okay, you've got to shut your eyes, Gary.
It's all right.
Okay, so when everybody's watching this back, you can try this as well. So I'd like you to imagine that you've walked into your kitchen, and I'd like you to go up to the fridge and open the fridge door, and on the shelf in the fridge is a lemon, and it is a really, really, you know, you can tell it's a really good lemon. It's got a lovely thick rind to it. It's going to be juicy. So I'd like you to reach into the fridge. I'd like to take it out, get a plate or a chopping board and a really sharp knife and cut that lemon in half. And as you do, the juice is squirting out, the oils are squirting all over your fingers. You can smell it. It's puddling all over the plate. And then I'd like you to cut a slice from one of the halves. And then cut that slice in half and pick half up and bring it dripping to your mouth, and then put that in your mouth and bite down, and the juice is squirting all over your mouth and you can smell the oils. Okay, now open your eyes. What's happening inside your mouth right now?
Yeah, I'm salivating.
Okay, so you're salivating, all right. Is there a lemon here? No. Your brain is predicting that you're going to eat a lemon because you've just given it enough information for it to liken that to an experience you've actually had. And so it is unconsciously preparing your mouth to eat. So it's getting saliva in the mouth ready to digest. You've had nothing to do with that other than me making some visual suggestions to you. That is an example of what happens when we go into the fight-flight response. You are getting unconscious information. Your brain is unconsciously filtering whatever information it's being presented with, and a vision in the head is enough, and it will get your body ready to leg it. Yeah,
it's like, again, going back to work, you know, decorating. If, you know, it's a job coming up you don't particularly fancy doing, you know, you're going to be playing it through your head, aren't you? And, you know, all those emotions and the anxiety are going to be kicking in, and you're sitting at home on your sofa, you know?
Exactly. You're going to be thinking about all the things that have gone wrong. Yeah.
And often when you do it, it's like, oh, it wasn't so bad.
So anyway, there's a little trick for you, which I quite like doing. So these are things that you can do, okay, or things that you can, really simple things, but I've got a little bit more explaining to do, unfortunately. All right. So we have got something called, and you'll see, if you Google vagus nerve, you will come up with coaches and people that are flogging for hundreds of pounds here and there, you know, to you know, do some particular therapy and it'll solve all your ills. Well, it's based on very sound science, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. So we've got the vagus nerve. It's one of the cranial nerves. So it starts in the back of the soft palate in the head. And it's actually the longest cranial nerve in the body, and it connects our brain to the body below. Obviously, there's lots of elements that where we're connected, but this cranial nerve is very significant. We've got two branches to it. One is called the ventral vagal branch, and that ventral vagal branch needs to be active for us to be socially engaged and reasonable and logical, all of that. So you can see how that's linked to the prefrontal cortex being online. The dorsal vagal branch is the one that's involved with resting and sleeping, but also when we're going to freeze. So, hopefully not many people have had the experience, but, being with a loved one who is close to passing, everything shuts down. They're in complete dorsal vagal mode. Everything's shutting down. Okay. And in between those two sit the sympathetic nervous system. And it looks a bit like this. So this yellow pathway here that you can see how significant it is. It's runs down the sort of spinal cord pathway. It then branches out into neural branches into the lungs, the heart, the liver that's implicated as well. I didn't mention the sympathetic nervous system. When you drop into that, all the sugars released there to give you more energy. All of your stomach, all the way down to the small intestine. So, but if we think of this as like a motorway of nervous traffic, nervous messages, 20% comes from the brain down, but 80% is actually going back up from the body up to the brain. So that's a resource, isn't it? If you've got the capacity to send messaging up from the body up to the brain, you can actually start interfering with this looping that's going on, because we're going into an anxiety loop. So sending very powerful or sending calming messages up to the brain can be really, really, really powerful. Because if our lungs are going into a dysregulated state, if we then start regulating our breathing, that's sending messages up to the brain that says, no, our lungs are breathing in a regulated way. Okay. If we, and when we breathe in a regulated pattern, we also slow our heart rate down. In fact, if we breathe in a rectangular pattern, which is the one that I initially teach people, when we breathe in, our heart rate does go up slightly because of pressure. And when we breathe out, our heart rate drops slightly. So if we breathe in on the short edge and out on the long edge, and in on the short edge and out on the long edge, and keep going, you are pushing your heart rate down. So you're getting a double whammy there. When we go into protect mode, when we're in fight, we might be fighting like this, but when we go into freeze, we start hunching in on ourselves. That's a normal protective response. So if we open our body up, they are positive somatic messages going back up to the brain. Okay. Sipping water is a great one. Keep your mouth nice and lubricate, moist, because actually, if you've got a dry mouth, that's a sign to the brain that you're feeling pretty anxious. There's also an awful lot out there about cold water therapy. Have you heard of Wim Hof?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So cold showers, I encourage a lot of clients to basically take a warm shower in the morning and just turn it cold for the last 10 seconds, and then increase that the more you go. And I've had a lot of clients be quite rude to me when I suggest it to them, but then a few weeks later they come back and go, you know what, Cathy, that was amazing. And I've had young men come back and go, oh, I'm doing 10 minutes now, freezing cold showers. And their anxiety, because it seems to introduce a controllable shock into the nervous system that's within your control, and then it increases resilience. The other interesting fact is that when our body is full of cortisol and adrenaline, in that stress response, we get all this inflammation is promoted in the body. Because if you are injured, you want inflammation in that area to promote healing. So when we're stuck in the response, we have much higher levels of inflammation. They're now understanding that high levels of inflammation underpin a lot of illness. So actually cold water therapy is shown now to reduce inflammation in the body. And if anybody wants to go and look at the Wim Hof website, he's got three masterclasses, 3 little mini classes that you can see. You don't have to pay anything, you just have to subscribe. And that explains his approach, which includes that. This is interesting because this proves the brain-body connection. This is the Stanford University, and these are heat body maps of very reliable emotional states. So they've done MRI scans of I don't know how many people, but significant numbers, because it's been published as research. So you can see the freeze response. Look, that's depression, isn't it? But look, the heat has moved to the center of the body. You feel cold in the extremities. Yeah. The sympathetic nervous system is implicated in positive emotions as well as negative emotions. But you can see here anger. Look, it's all look in the fists, the heart, the lungs, the head's on fire here. But happiness, it involves the whole body. Shame does look like Spider-Man, seems to sit quite a lot behind the eyes, etc., etc. But that's just, I'll pop that there because that's interesting.
Yeah, it's often when you do feel anxious, you get cold hands and stuff, don't you? And
well, yeah, if you're dropping into freeze, I mean, well, look here, you see anxiety. Yeah. If you're feeling really angry, I mean, everybody's got their own way of responding to anxiousness. Some people will withdraw, and some people will go straight into fight mode, and they're the ones that usually get themselves in hot water. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Never seen that before.
Oh, haven't you? Okay.
No.
And again, this is where the good news is, because nothing is too late. You are never too late to change the way your brain responds. Okay, it takes some work, obviously. Working with young people, unless there's loads and loads and loads of abuse and trauma involved, but working with young people, their issues seem to be bubbling just below the surface. As you get older, you tend to develop unhelpful coping mechanisms, don't you? So they can take a little bit more unpicking. But we've got 128 billion neurons in this brain, and we've got this thing called neuroplasticity. Our brain's always changing. It's always responding to information. It's such an amazing thing, our brain. If we don't use, if when we start doing something, we start developing a new neural pathway. Okay, our brain goes, oh, okay, this is new. This is a new series of neurons that are all collecting up. Oh, there's a pathway there. And the more you do it, the more it recognizes it. If you stop doing a new habit or learning something new after 6 days, the brain goes, well, I don't need that anymore, and it crops it back, gets rid of it.
Some of your not coping mechanisms, but pattern interrupts, sipping water and that kind of stuff. So that will create new neural pathways, right?
That's everything that we do, physical behavior, ways of thinking about things, all of that develops new neural pathways. Okay. And the more we use the pathways, the connections become stronger. And it's called, this term was coined, when neurons fire together. And this is the big thing to not only this, remember this, but this is when your neurons fire together, they wire together. And actually research has shown that after 60 days of practicing something new, the brain recognizes it as a really useful pathway in the brain. And so it puts myelin around the neural pathway to insulate it, like electric wires. Okay. And then that becomes like a super fast highway. So it becomes an automatic habit. So once you've learned how to do something, you've practiced it enough and you keep it up, it's an automatic thing. It becomes quicker. So that's the real good news thing for people, learning how to do things new. And this is where things like slight edge habits come in. Have you heard of slight edge habits? It's like things that are easy to do, and things that are easy not to do. And you can, you know, if you do one press up every morning, in a year, you'll have done 365 press ups more than if you hadn't.
Yeah.
So doing something small every day to promote the direction you want to go in is very powerful. It doesn't have to be a great big change. You don't have to suddenly reinvent yourself. You can do it very slowly but surely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So there we go. Questions?
Well, there's been a few people watching, no questions yet, and I'm sure lots of people will have questions perhaps later on when they've seen it all. So yeah, just a few feedback from Jessica. She's painting spindles, but fantastic info. But it's like, I'm so glad you come on, because of course it's a painting group, but you know, I can only speak from my experience. From, you know, the reason I got into hypnotherapy is because I saw someone for my anxiety and stuff, and I was seeing different people for a year or two. No one could really help me, and then I saw a cognitive hypnotherapist, you know, 4 or 5 sessions. I was like, wow, I feel brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And it was just, it fascinated me so much. I was like, I've got to learn how to do it myself, you know. And it was more a journey for me. And that's why I think it's so important to do these talks, because, you know, we've all got, even if we don't suffer ourselves, I'm sure we know somebody that's struggling a little bit. And you explained it so well, just to kind of normalize it, and, you know, to say there's nothing wrong with anybody. It's a normal response, but it's just a program which is outdated, not true. And, you know, it's important to kind of recognize when you're feeling those symptoms and realizing it's not true here and now. You know, you are okay.
Yeah,
And
the danger's not present. The danger
exactly.
is back there somewhere.
And it just, you know, I'm sure people listening back to it or listening now will be able to tie it into their lives, and painting and decorating and working and stuff, because every step of what you've explained is all relevant to kind of your work and your life, you know. So it's really, really good to listen to. I don't believe we've got any questions, but no, it's fascinating. I mean, I just made a few notes. Again, I'm repeating myself. It's just to normalize, you know, how you're feeling. You know, it is normal response. You know, your tips on how to recognize it and interrupt it, to create those new pathways so you don't go into fight or flight. And it's even like, the difficulty is for people, I believe, and when I was trying to get better, was you'd read loads of books, you know, why am I feeling like this? And, you know, it's like, what's wrong with me? But, you know, unless you see someone, it's very difficult to identify it yourself, because, you know, we may not even identify it, you know, working with somebody. It might just be an understanding of it, or it might be, oh yeah, I can see how it does relate to certain incidents, which we can change, like the unconscious program.
But the big thing to remember here is, because a lot of people will go into, right, I'm going to improve myself, I'm going to read, like you say, read loads of stuff, I'm going to therapize myself, I'm going to sort all of this out. Just remember, when the source code events have happened, this part of your brain, which is the brain, the part that you use to do this higher level cognitive stuff, right, wasn't online. So you're trying to access something using this bit that isn't here. It's held at a much more fundamentally basic level within the brain.
Yeah.
And you can't necessarily access that.
No.
So trying to think your way out of your problem, that's why it so often doesn't work. And then we beat ourselves up even more and go, well, I've done all of this, it must be me. So my big message from this is, everybody's normal. We're all normal. Deal with it physically. Physically interrupt it by using those body support mechanisms. Breath work is so powerful. Cold water therapy is so powerful. use those and see the difference then. I had somebody recently who came and had had a lifelong fear of heights that got worse and worse and worse and worse. And simply teaching him the breath work completely transformed his experience, because he knew he was going into somewhere where it was going to trigger him. So he reset his body with a whole load of breath work, and he went, oh my goodness, how simple, but how powerful. So go in through the feeling and deal with it like that.
I also helped a guy on site a few years ago. So he fell off some scaffolding years ago. And I just briefly spoke to him about your unconscious and how it gives you these feelings to keep you alive and all the rest of it. So, of course, when he was going up a ladder, he was getting a fight or flight was kicking in, his heart was racing, he didn't want to do it. And I said, well, that's obvious, isn't it? You know, last time you went up a ladder, you fell back and almost killed yourself. And as soon as I spoke to it, next day he come up to me and he's like, I can't believe it, Gary, I managed to get up a ladder, because I know, you know, it was sort of inside, all the staircase had come out and he was shitting it every day going up this ladder. And then he come in and said, oh, I've done it fine, you know, because I said to myself, you know, there's no danger now, I'm not going up scaffold.
Exactly. You know? And also another thing is when people, you know, some people might go into a real panicky response and they might be stuck in that moment, and it's almost like that part of them has taken them over and has taken them to that place of fear. Being with someone like that and reassuring them and helping them to breathe and giving them connection in that moment can also be incredibly powerful, because they're in that moment of fear and suddenly they feel safe. Imagine how powerful that is for the unconscious processes of the brain. You go, well, actually, I'm safe, and the fear can move away. So you know, we can help each other like this. You don't have to, not everybody has to go and see a therapist, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a quick one before you go, because I appreciate your time. So, you know, it's identifying it, recognizing it, you know, even writing it down in a diary, whatever. What about when someone feels they're at that tipping point going into kind of real anxiety, or, you know, say they've reached that particular point? What would you recommend? I know it's difficult because your rational brain switched off, but, you know, if you're on your own, what would be your...
Well, I mean, if this happens to you regularly, right, all right, I would learn some basic breath work exercises, and I would practice them, not when you're feeling panicky. I would practice them day in, day out. I ask clients to roll out of bed in the morning and do a breath work exercise. I include some arm movements as well, but I sort of teach that. We could do that another day. And because they're teaching their brain the process, and so when they're getting to the point they're just about to tip and they recognize that, if they start doing the breath work, then their new neural pathway will take over and go, oh, I know what I'm doing here. And it will take over. If you don't do it until the moment, guess what? You're going to forget. So if you know you're predisposed to have panicky moments, get practicing. Go and look up some there's so much out there on YouTube. Always, you know, make sure you've got some water or a drink on you. Always keep that mouth nice and moist. Breath work. And maybe if you know that you're prone to a bit of anxiety, check out those cold showers. Try them. You can call me names in them. I don't care.
I'm going to start trying it. My son does it, but I haven't braved it yet. But you know, it is good for you anyway, isn't it? You know,
it is really good for you.
Right. So, yeah, again, Cathy, I really appreciate it. It's been really informative. Pleasure. Even if, like I said, someone, a member's not struggling, I'm sure they probably know someone that maybe is a little bit, so they can sort of pass on what we've done here. And you know, it's going to be a forever resource within the group. And like I said, I'm going to create a guide section, so all my previous chats are going to be in there on all various subjects, and lots more going forward as well. So I appreciate your time, and cheers everyone for watching. Hope you're all well, and yeah, I'm going to hit the pause button now. So have a good afternoon.
All right, thanks, Ken.
Take care.